Back. This is right before school, so let's do this.
Everyone knows the story of the Titanic, but not many people know that Titanic had two sister ships, and that on the night of its sinking, one of them was rushing to help, but didn't
The first and second funnel, third and fourth.
make it in time. Bad luck seemed to follow the trio of ships, but each one of them had glorious moments that live in the minds of those who sailed in them. Keep on watching to discover a story of awe, ingenuity, and ill fate. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and turn notifications on to join us on the bright side of life.
Not even gonna say anything. You just watch Storyteller's video.
You know how the iceberg hit the Titanic, how the band played to
Uno reverse card.
the end, and how the whole tragedy unfolded.
Titanic's a canard ship, and the waves are very rough.
But before it happened, it would have seemed an impossibility for such a ship to meet the end it did. None of that could have been foreseen by White Star Line, the company who built the Titanic.
I've said this in every video I've recorded now. White Star Line didn't build Titanic. They own Titanic. Harland and Wolff built Titanic. Jeez.
Had high hopes for what the unsinkable ship and its sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic, would accomplish.
Yeah, they named
The Olympic
that.
was the first of the trio to make sail on June 11th, 1911, heading towards New York. The sheer size of it would
very quality render.
wow the crowds. The Olympic's maiden voyage went without incident, and a crowd of 8,000 people in New York got to explore its luxurious accommodations while it was docked there. There were
What was that grand staircase?
high expectations for the massive ship, but just around 2 months later, the Olympic crashed with the HMS Hawk. The Hawk got the brunt of the damage, as the bow was left flat as a pancake. After the crash, the Olympic made its way slowly back to Belfast, where the Titanic was being constructed. On the dock, people could see the two enormous ships side by side, as parts of the Titanic were used to put the Olympic back in shape. A rare sight to behold.
The only other time I've seen that photograph is when Historic Travels reacted to this.
On April 14th, 1912, the Titanic hit an iceberg, and minutes later, the crew radioed nearby ships for help. That night, the Olympic was returning from New York when it received the distress signal. The ship turned around and rushed at full speed towards the Titanic, but they were so far away that they would have arrived next night. At some point during the early hours of April 15th, 1912, the crew of the Olympic decided they wouldn't make it in time and stopped course.
They called Carpathia and asked them if they could take their passengers, but they said no.
The survivors of the Titanic were eventually rescued by the Carpathia.
Big Ben.
Olympic was set up with lifeboats for all crew and passengers
This is Titanic. This is Titanic.
after the Titanic sank. It went from having 20 lifeboats to 64. Changes were also made to the watertight bulkheads and an extra hull to construct a type of
Now that is what you call Olympic. Not that other crappy one with 3 funnels that I reacted to.
double hull was installed. It was determined that a double hull would have kept the Titanic from sinking. For several years,
That already existed on Titanic, but whatever.
Olympic was used in the war effort against Germany.
You made a video
Throughout
about
the
it.
years, Olympic carried over 200,000 passengers, which included thousands of Americans fleeing from Europe and troops battling during World War I.
If I see that dumb photograph with the one funnel ship again, I'm gonna stop the video.
One of the most significant moments for this ship was when it struck a German submarine and sank it. It was discovered that the submarine was preparing to fire a torpedo on the Olympic before Olympic rammed it. The Olympic ended up sailing the seas for 3 decades, which earned her the nickname of the Old Reliable, despite some previous accidents. It went on to help the survivors on the HMS Audacious when it was sinking, and do what it couldn't for its sister,
Titanic random photograph, and that's Captain Smith up there.
Titanic. Eventually, bad luck caught up with the Olympic.
That's just a random photo of a Nantucket lightship with a random ship heading at sea. There was actually a fog, and the Olympic hit one of the lightships.
The ship crashed with the Nantucket lightship, and the crash signaled the beginning of the end.
Nope.
Beaten up, And after years of service,
Not beaten up.
the Olympic
Wait, I just realized that's a toy ship. Frick.
was demolished and scrapped for parts.
This was the Great Depression. This was the Great Depression. This was the Great Depression. Olympic was scrapped for jobs.
The old Reliable saw many years of service and thousands of passengers, but the Britannic's journey was
AI.
shorter-lived. When the Titanic sank, White Star Line was faced with a problem since they already had another enormous ship in the works. White Star Line began construction on the HMHS Britannic on November 30th, 1911, around 4 months before the Titanic
They used the same dumb clip.
sank. Although the Britannic was the youngest of the trio
AI.
of ships, having been constructed last, it was also the biggest. They intended to name it Gigantic,
AI.
but after the Titanic's disaster, they changed the name to Britannic, since they considered it to be a lucky name. With the Titanic sinking, the White Star Line underwent rigorous investigation, and many changes were
Wait. Yeah, that's Olympic, not Britannic.
made to the Britannic's design. The Britannic looked very similar to the
AI.
Titanic, and it had what was at the time the largest marine turbine in the world, able to reach faster speeds than the Olympic. With Titanic's fate fresh in their minds, everything possible was done to ensure the safety of this newer ship. The Britannic was eventually launched on February 26, 1914,
That's a thing of the Olympic.
almost 2 years after Titanic met its end. After the Titanic's disaster,
They didn't launch the ship's bow first. It was like stern first or something.
the White Star Line wanted the Britannic to redeem their name. The Britannic was on its way to becoming a successful ship. It transported passengers for over a year and a half when the British government requisitioned it
What is
and
this
turned it into
weird
a hospital
in
ship
color off
during the
photo?
beginning of
What is that weird in color off photo? Like, I won't even stop. Cool, I don't want to look at Violet Jessup.
World War I. The ship became an even more impressive sight to look
It's
at.
a floating sandbox, dude.
It was painted all white, with enormous red crosses on its side to indicate it was a hospital ship. One of the ship's surgeons, Dr. J.T.H. Beaumont, thought of it as the most wonderful hospital ship that ever sailed the seas. It could treat as many as 3,309 patients at once. This is how the Britannic became His Majesty's hospital ship, or
So 18 extra inches of width could lead to 1,000 more people on the ship? I never knew that.
HMHS Britannic. Though the sight of this magnificent ship must have put a smile on a wounded soldier's
That's in Naples.
face or two, the Britannic didn't operate for long. Just a year after it was turned into a hospital ship, the Britannic was making its way through the Aegean Sea to pick up wounded soldiers when it was struck by a loud explosion. The passengers didn't know what had happened, but headed to the deck to disembark. It is unclear what hit the Britannic, but the general consensus is that it was struck by a mine left by a German U-boat, though some still believe a torpedo hit it.
It's confirmed that a mine hit it.
Captain tried to move the ship to a beach close by, but the ship was sinking fast. In the desperation, against the captain's orders,
That's Titanic again!
several crew members launched lifeboats and disembarked. But since the ship was moving and the propellers working, the lifeboats were sucked and destroyed by the
That's the rudder. Huh? Go watch the Star Travels.
propellers. Though so much effort had gone in to ensure the Britannic was safer than the Titanic, whatever explosion occurred left the Britannic in the same
Random painting. Like, is this a painting or is this a photo? I have no idea what this is. This is a painting.
dire condition as the Titanic in just 10 minutes.
The bows
In a
are
cruel
bad.
twist of fate, it also sank in the ocean.
What else would it sink in? Britannic sank in lava. No dip, Sherlock.
Unlike Titanic's enormous death toll, only 30 people perished in the sinking of the Britannic, and over 1,000 survived. So many people survived because the accident happened in the morning, when the temperature of the water was warmer and the Greek island Kea was close by to offer help. In the end, the Britannic only sailed the seas for over 2.5 years. The bad luck that followed the Titanic and the Britannic and the accidents and demise of the Olympic was remarkable. But what was most impressive is that there was a woman who sailed on all 3 ships and survived.
I already mentioned her.
Violet Jessup was a crew member and nurse aboard the ships. She was there when the Olympic collided with the HMS Hawk in 1911 and disembarked safely. 2 years later, she escaped the sinking of the Titanic in lifeboat number 16, and she showed some women it was safe to board the lifeboats. You'd imagine that would be enough to keep her from ever getting on a boat again, but not for her. A few years later, she served as a nurse in the Britannic while it was used as a hospital ship. When the explosion occurred, Violet jumped overboard.
She did not jump overboard, and she did not hit her head on the keel.
Was pulled under by the water and hit her head on the keel but survived. Can you imagine her experience? She must have had nerves of steel.
She did.
All in all, the trio of ships saw
Titanic, Titanic, Britannic, and close promenade on all 3.
journeys of triumph and tragedy. Ill fate might have followed them, but all the survivors were left with incredible stories to tell. So tell us, Brightsiders, would you have liked to have seen any of these ships in real life?
Yes.
Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to give this video a like, share it with your friends, and click subscribe to stay on the bright side.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity,